Hey, what's going on, guys? Today we're going to be talking about the difference between the engineers and the researchers' mindset in regards to picking up the right direction while searching for data sources to scrape. And for those of you who has a dilemma of if you don't have an experience, then you can't get a job, and just to get a job, you need to have an experience. So, just in order to escape this sort of a dilemma, the way I advise to my subscribers is actually start doing things on your own without waiting for a job to occur, and eventually you'll end up getting an experience on doing some real world projects. Probably you won't really get paid for those projects at the very first, but still the experience would be completely real. So that's the practical way how to escape that stuff. But when it comes to searching for data sources to scrape, there might be some common mistakes, and one of the most important things regarding picking up the data sources for web scraping for your education projects, like when you're just trying to obtain some sort of a web scraping skills, it's really important to pick up the right data sources, because in web scraping your reward heavily depends on the particular data you're scraping. And let me try to explain this point in a little bit more details. I would say in a great details, because it's a very important point there. So imagine that there is a guy who wants to buy a smartphone within a given price range, and he wants somebody to scrape like up to 10 sites that and eventually to get, say, up to 10 CSV files, each one, say, I don't know, like 500 smartphones every CSV file. And then he wants, just based on that data, pick up the one that actually fits his needs. And now you might wonder that obviously if he wants to buy not kind of very like expensive smartphone, if he want to buy some budget version, let's say, so how much is he supposed to pay for that to that freelancer who would scrape up to 5 or 10 sites for him? So I don't know, $20, but that's it, because he won't really be paying you the amount of how much his smartphone costs. Basically, that would be a complete nonsense. So I hope the idea is clear. But in order to scrape, say, smartphones, that's literally the same efforts like if, say, to scrape real estate properties or whatever else. So the efforts are all about the same, but at the very end, you will end up kind of like as if this was actually a free job at all, because the efforts you can't even compare the efforts spent to scrape those sites and this miserable $20 basically. Well, that's just for an example. So what I would like to say in this particular video what's the message, that the particular data you scrape really matters, and the more precise you choose the data to scrape, the more potential reward you can obtain in return, and that's very important. And you might wonder, why on earth am I talking about engineers versus researchers mindset in this case? And here is the deal, basically, because the most highly paid web scraping jobs are those that are related with some sort of a machine learning projects. Machine learning projects are probably one of the most highly paid projects on the market, basically, even more compared to the web development projects, because machine learning projects allows people to make money. Yeah, so they spend money to make even more money, and they making machine learning projects to increase their own income, so they're ready to pay money to get even more money in return. So this like projects are kind of like investments, while web projects, you're just spending money for advertisement or things like that. So it's not going to bring any money back in return in that respect, how this is going to happen in regards to machine learning projects that are really intended to increase the income. So from this point, what I can say that that's absolutely, I'm talking regarding my own experience, absolutely relying on that. So I would say that exactly the machine learning projects are the most uh, like well paid projects for web scraping. So uh, that's if you're picking up some sort of a project for you to consider from, say, two clients, and say the first client is just somebody who will be making money based on the data you will provide him, and another one won't be making money based on the data that you would provide him, then you definitely need to choose the first guy, because he would pay, I don't know, 300s, 400s, 500% more compared to the first guy. And that's very important strategy when you're picking up some web scraping projects for yourself. And uh, another thing, that if you don't have clients yet but you want to obtain some, then you need to have some sort of a data that is interesting for those clients that would, in theory, could have used the data you scraped for their machine learning purposes. And that's the exact case I'm currently working on. So I just made a couple of a couple of real estate property scrapers for about 2 months ago, and then I pick up a client that actually I'm working with that client for more than 2 months at the moment, actually. And that's I got a significant growth, pledge growth, basically, because of this, because the data is so valuable for him. So just to bear that in mind. And I hope now it's pretty clear regarding the difference between the data type you're supposed to be scraping. So before trying to scrape some site for learning purposes or something, just try to think if this data is used, can be used for machine learning purposes or not. So let me just provide you an example. We'll say sports. Like sport bets and match result predictions are really is really wide field in regards to machine learning tasks, basically. Also, I could have mentioned like stock prices. That's another niche. So, well, real estate properties, what I'm currently working on. So, literally the same. But if you would be scraping, like bass guitars that I was doing before, or like some lamps, or some weird stuff that nobody really cares about, that case, that wouldn't really bring you much at all. So that was regarding the difference between the data sources to scrape. And now let's get back to the very gist regarding the engineers versus researchers mindset. So those guys who is doing web scraping or maybe web development at some point, they more like engineers, because they have. So here I would like to describe what regards to the engineer cycle, basically. So setting up the concrete goals. So either the let's consider web scraping for simplicity, basically. So it has a very concrete goal. You just need to obtain the data set. That's it. Looking for a proper solution. So you could have used Python, whatever language, whatever framework, different tools, different methods. So you're open to whatever technologies you're about to pick up. And when you're done, basically you're trying to automate your routine tasks, so something that you're doing daily, and every time you have a repetition, you're just trying to automate that as much as possible. So that's kind of the engineer cycle. And now when we go to the researcher cycle, and in this case I assume the specialist that is all about kind of machine learning, let's say. So he doesn't have a concrete goal. He assumes an idea, and working with data, with the statistics, it's always like about assuming an ideas, and then he's building an abstract data models. So to kind of wrap that idea into some sort of a it's not material even, but just he's just trying to wrap his idea into some sort of a abstract model that would try to describe this idea a little bit more precisely. And finally, it comes to scaling models, because that's the difference between, like, machine learning projects that don't bring anything in return, and the machine learning projects that allow to grow income from one of a company significantly. So scaling models means like that you can manage your model the profitable way. That's kind of it. So that's the difference between those who do make money on kind of machine learning, and those who just added some courses but have no idea how actually to make use of them in their own careers. So that's kind of the difference. And the very last thing to consider is actually I would say that the engineers can't work abstractly. They need particular tasks and guidelines to be efficient. So if you tell an engineer like, I have an idea, I would like you to do something on it, he would just say like, no, I need a concrete task. That's the only way how I can work. And on the other hand, if it deals if it's about the researcher, so he hates doing routine stuff like updating data sets. So like it's incredibly different for the guy who does machine learning and has the researcher's mindset. It's incredibly hard for him to pick up the particular selectors, programming languages, frameworks, scrolling through all those sites. So summarizing all the said in this video, I would like to mention that working in pairs makes oh, I did a mistake here. Working in pairs lets both do their best, basically. So that means that if someone an expert in machine learning would find someone, a guy who's an expert in web scraping, and cooperate, whatever project would win from that cooperation. And that's the exact format I'm currently working under. So what I would like to say that picking up exactly your niche is very important. So if you have engineers mindset like I do, like I think the most guys on this channel, it's really cool to do just the pure tech jobs. Like web scraping is a great example. And like it's also very important to have somebody who values that. Like the casual guy from the street doesn't really care about your skills, that you can obtain a data set and things like that. But if you come to someone an expert who in machine learning, and he really needs those data sets just like to breathe the air, and he would be so happy to work with you, and he would kind of evaluate your job really like the right way, basically. And either he would be paying directly, or he would introduce you to the client he's working on, working with, whatever. So this sort of a cooperation really ends up with a really profitable projects that are extremely pleasant to work on. So bearing this in mind, I wish you guys to find your own way and try to scrape the right sources and try to find the right people to work with, to cooperate with. So this is it for this video, and until the next time, and take care.